Cool. How are we doing? Can you hear me? Yep. I am Scottish, so you might hear me, but you might not understand me, so we'll just work with it. Cool, so my name is Tom. As Martin said, I work here at Simple Business. I'm one of the engineering leads. I think we've got about half an hour before pizza and beer arrive, so I'll try and keep to time. And basically what I would like to do is just spend some time and give you some insight to the journey that we've been on recently in one of the teams, whereby we've been looking at React and how we can use it and its ecosystem, and take you through some of the stuff that we found, and particularly why we're driving towards React and Gatsby to help ultimately unlock better experiences for our customers. We still very much work as though we were a startup, and in fact we use Eric Ries's lean startup methodology to kind of help influence everything that we do as a company, not just in tech, but across the whole business. And the reason why I'm pointing that out is because obviously you might think, Agile, we all do Agile, you know, hashtag Agile, we're all cool. But this really does drive everything that we do across the whole ecosystem of the business. And indeed, this has played a very significant role in how we've landed where we are. So it's worth pointing out just now, for people that aren't particularly familiar with the BML, which is effectively build, measure, learn. So it's a feedback loop. You build something, you measure how it worked via a variety of ways, and you learn from it. And that feeds back into the next iteration. And the key to all of this, and the book that produced this, is it's all very well going around this loop. The key to success is being able to do that as fast as physically possible. And that comes into a massive play to why we've ultimately landed on Gatsby. Cool, so let's learn fast straight away. The first thing that's worth learning, which I'm sure everybody knows but I totally forgot about, is don't do any heavy thinking at 1 o'clock in the morning, such as trying to create talks, because you come up with some weird random gibberish. I mean, we'll get into the Jamstack later, but it's a great stack because there's so many wordplays to play on it. Unfortunately, sometimes you come into some weird stuff. And then also, I'm sure, again, everybody that's super social, keep your LinkedIn profile up to date. This picture is like over 10 years old from my previous life. And I was totally surprised and confused, in fact, where it came from. But yeah, figured it out, LinkedIn, GDPR, all that. Cool, so the roadmap, very quick, give you a motivation, again, why we're here, why we've kind of come across this journey, and why we even started it in the first place. A quick note about the Jamstack, and then on to some of the specifics of Gatsby. This is going to be a very high-level talk. There's too much to really throw into 30 minutes. So this will be a total like high-level swish-wash over everything that we found, the kind of things we figured out. If you want to know any more technical detail or whatever, I'll be hanging around. Come grab me, have pizza. Cool, so let's continue to measure. The dreaded question. So in the audience, how many people know or have heard of the Jamstack? Awesome, not many. That's exactly what I wanted to hear. The risk of asking that question is everybody put their hand up, this could have been a very boring talk. That might be boring, but we'll learn that as we go. Gatsby, people know what Gatsby is? Tons of people know what Gatsby is. Cool, this might be slightly boring, but we'll figure it out. Cool, so first the motivating parts. What drove us to go through this path, and why did we ultimately pivot in what we were doing beforehand? So we, as I said, we're a BML setup. We have a dedicated user research team. We even have a dedicated user space to do that research. We constantly bring users in, either customers or otherwise, and we poke and prod them and figure out what it is they need and what we do and what we don't. And basically through continuous iterations of that, we've identified that there's a lot of customer pain points in our current digital platforms in certain places. And indeed, in some places, we're not even meeting some of their needs. As Martin said earlier, we cater to a very wide range of audiences. And as you can imagine, all their needs are very specific and very different. But even more than just identifying, so it's great, we've all measured and we've learned, we now understand that there's opportunity sitting there. We also found out that a lot of those pain points and or unmet needs could be easily solved with better or more enriched user experiences. However, with the current stack that we have at the minute, being able to implement and kind of prototype and figure out what is the right thing to do, that is currently just too high. The cost to do that is just too high. And that cost doesn't have to be necessarily complexity, it's just the ultimate impact on that loop is just too long that it's just often not worth doing it in the first place. So we ultimately concluded that we needed to find a more optimal solution to try and help optimize this BML loop feedback so that we can continually learn and iterate on our digital estate. So we obviously landed on, we need to re-platform parts of our digital estate, particularly in the front end space. And that is obviously something that doesn't ever really go down very well when you come back to the business, because re-platform is obviously a very risk process and very expensive and sometimes very difficult. So keeping this BML methodology in our mindset, we have to try and figure out, we need to re-platform in order to fix these problems and go even further. but how do we do that as fast as possible so that we continually figure out that what we're replatform is indeed not just the right thing for our customers, but it's also the right thing for us as a business to help accelerate the process. So now that we've identified the problem, we have to figure out what it is we need to look for, given that we've got like a vast array of options out there in the ecosystem. And because this is front end, it's almost certainly different now than it was like yesterday. So the kind of key things that we were looking for, we were already a React company, albeit not very deep, but we knew that React was the thing that we wanted to use. It obviously has to play exclusively well with the JS ecosystem. For better or worse, the JS ecosystem is massive. It's very well supported. There's tons of solutions to common problems. And if you can get somebody else to write the code for you and leverage that ecosystem, way better for us. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. We also need something that's battle tested. We don't actually want to live too far on the edge. And also it has to be something that's well supported and obviously maintained, because if it isn't, then we're effectively writing and creating it ourselves. And we really want to try and get away from reinventing the wheel and having to create and support this kind of network as we go along. And obviously, it needs to consume Markdown. We already have a large digital estate where a lot of our content is already in Markdown. And we also have a really tight relationship with various parts in the business that aren't necessarily technical. So we use this as a common medium to help optimize various strategies across the company, such as marketing campaigns or other different types of initiatives. So that was a big key for us. And then obviously the architecture has to be something that's robust, but not just solid and well tested, but it has to be something that we can extend and customize very easily. Because again, we want to do things fast as possible. We want to figure out what the right thing is as fast as possible. So we don't have to work against an architecture, we want to work with it. And then crucially for front-end devs, we want it to be a rich developer experience. We want to be able to focus on the right tool set, the right setup, and we want to get that feedback as quick as possible so that developers are spending more time on the feature set and less on just trying to get things into the system at hand. And then obviously SEO is massive for us as a company. Being a relatively small company is one of our biggest key drivers. And then obviously mobile now as a company, we are very focused on mobile, even though it's 2019, but it's super critical as a company. Whatever we pick has to be fast and mobile optimized out of the box. And then finally, we as a company are scaling rapidly. We're looking in different markets across the globe, and we're also looking into and accessing different markets. So whatever solution we bring in, it has to have global scalability straight out of the box. So obviously there's a massive plethora, but obviously we didn't have all the time to assess absolutely everything. So we had to figure out where are we now and what is the minimum steps that we can take to where we want to get all these things. So a lot of our stack currently is Ruby based. So we looked at re-architecting some of the stack that we have with a more focus on the front end stuff. And we tried some pilots and some tests, and whilst we managed to tick some of these boxes, we didn't manage to solve all of them. So that kind of became a blocker for us. So we then moved on to the JS ecosystem, trying to think in Node and the likes of that. But again, whilst it solved some of these problems, it didn't solve all of them, or at least not in a time frame that we were really happy with. So that led us to some other pre-packaged solutions like Create React App, Gatsby, Next.js, etc. But as we went through this kind of process and we were trying to figure out what it is we were looking for, constantly getting feedback from our stakeholders and figure out how is it we do this as fast as possible and also learn as fast as possible so that we're constantly building the right thing at the right time. We want to ultimately make sure that whatever effort we spend is in the right thing. We naturally landed on something called the Jamstack. And thankfully not many people know about the Jamstack, but it's pretty cool, not least the title because there's so many things you can do with it. But effectively, it's so this is a statement from Matthias Billman, who's the co-founder and CEO of Netlify. If everybody's never used, how many people have used Netlify so far? Awesome. If you haven't used Netlify, it is unbelievable. It is mind-boggling how fast it is, and it's free for the most part. So effectively, this is the Jam effectively starts for JavaScript, client-side JavaScript, crucially, reusable APIs, and then pre-built markup. Now, although a lot of people will think, well, that's not really brand new, the thing that is new with the Jamstack is that there's no servers involved here, obviously with the caveat that there's as many servers involved here as there is serverless. There's still a server somewhere, you just don't care about it. And this gives us a massive amount of benefits, not least of which is a simplification, but it's faster performance. You'll be pretty hard pushed to beat serving pre-made assets, whether it's HTML, CSS, JavaScript, whatever, directly from the CDN versus calculating it on the fly with a typical server interaction. It also increases your security because you're ditching the server, so your attack surface is significantly smaller. If you don't integrate with any APIs, then it's almost, it's not zero, but it's certainly closer to zero. But by architecting your backend services into isolated microservice APIs, it means that you have more focus and control over the attack surface so that your security can be significantly increased. And then, again, now that you're in this kind of world, if you want to delegate that to some specialist domain expert, some third party, then the security is no longer your kind of initial cost. And then finally, well, not finally, but it's cheap and it's infinitely scalable. The fact is you only have static files that you have to give to your customers. And you're already serving them from a CDN, and CDNs typically out the box are already globally available and are ready to handle large traffic spikes or otherwise. So it's already cheap and ready to scale as you, as a company, scales with it. And then, as I mentioned before, this loose coupling between the client-side of things and the server-side stack allows your engineers to focus more on the things that are either interesting to them or part of their expertise. So it means that you can spend more time focusing on feature delivery and less time just trying to figure out some other tools that you don't necessarily care about. So we settled on Gatsby, we settled on the Jamstack. It seemed like a good fit for the digital estate in which we were looking to re-platform. And then the next thing was what kind of tool we use. And Gatsby seemed like an obvious tool, not least of which the massive community that's behind it and the lifespan and the momentum that it's got in the industry. But also it just seemed to like have all the things that we were looking for. And I'll mention some of these in a minute. So for people that don't know what Gatsby is, it's effectively a static site generator. The static is slightly a misnomer because it is client-side JavaScript. So once you get into the client, you can do whatever you want with JavaScript. But effectively, you give it some data and some templates, which are built in React. And then Gatsby basically processes that, punches the data into the templates, and outputs the static HTML, JS, and CSS. And then now that you only have static assets, you throw that on an S3 bucket or some storage mechanism, and then set it behind a CDN. This is our particular flavor of how we have Gatsby currently configured, and we call this Reactor. And effectively, our setup is we've got an in-house component library, which we're building based on Emotion.js and Styled System. If nobody's ever used Styled System, by the way, it's absolutely amazing. It's so much powerful than most of the alternatives. And then we use Gatsby and its GraphQL layer, which I'll mention later. It pulls the data in from the variety of data sources that you can throw at it, and it gives us the HTML and CSS, and then you simply set up your CI to automatically copy all those static files and throw it on an S3 bucket. And then you configure your CDN to point to that, and then off you go. Now, the reason why the static name set here is a misnomer is because although the initial download in the client is static, it's just pre-built content in HTML with some CSS. Once it's actually downloaded completely and all your assets have downloaded, like the JavaScript, then Gatsby actually just switches into an SPA, it rehydrates the page, and then you're just into like a React SPO, an SPA, and at that point you can do whatever you want to do, what you would typically do in React, which is immensely powerful. So we're currently, the team that I'm on at the minute is currently piloting this to see how it fits with our wider digital estate. And we're basically taking a system and re-architecting it into this Gatsby setup. And anything that we have that's currently a backend setup that we can't lose or can't replace with something else in this setup, we basically have pushed it into a microservice serverless Lambda, which is working amazingly well. So what in particular is it about Gatsby that helps us achieve these goals? So all that kind of laundry list of things that we want to do, and also how do we end up bringing in this mindset of being able to drive highly enriched, data-driven user experiences? Well, Gatsby out of the box, without even doing anything, already has modularity built into its core. Everything's got a very well-distinct place and purpose, so it's super easy to get in and hack away and make things happen. It also has a core plugin base, which allows you to massively extend and or customize what it physically does. And with that, on top of that, it also has a whole array of access points into its lifecycle. Now, because this happens before you deploy anywhere, the lifecycle here isn't React lifecycle. This is the lifecycle, the process that Gatsby defines by which it consumes that data, matches it into your template, and then generates the static sites. And then one of the big key factors that we found in this, which was maybe a surprise, maybe not a surprise, was the GraphQL being native out of the box. And all these together have proved to be immensely valuable in our iterative approach to try and figure out what it is we need to build and how do we want to do it. So just a little bit of background. Again, apologies if you already know Gatsby, but just to kind of try and build the mental model of how Gatsby is physically put together. Because although the docs are amazing, there's so much docs already behind this, there is some parts that aren't so easy to kind of stitch together. So hopefully this kind of helps clarify that. It certainly helped us. But so Gatsby has this modular core built into it, and it's typically delegated to files, JavaScript files that have very particular names in order to get access to whichever part of the Gatsby infrastructure you want to attack. By default, every Gatsby site has to have a config file. That's the kind of brain of the setup, your system-wide web app setup. This is where you define things that you typically share across the entire site, like SEO metadata, any other kind of data. Also where you configure any plugins, which I'll get to in a minute, and a whole variety of stuff. I mean, the API is way too large to document here. And then with the lifecycle APIs, if you want to physically get into Gatsby and say, I want to customize how the output physically runs, then you can access one of the lifecycle APIs. And these are currently grouped into a group of 3 different types. So there's a browser API, which happens in the runtime. In the client, these are things that you write that physically Gatsby will package up and ship to the end user. And these are things like if you want to automatically wrap every single page that you create, all your templates, with some kind of provider, whether that's like a Redux provider or some kind of theme provider, whatever. And then a whole bunch of other stuff if you want to add some analytics into certain parts of how and when your client side code physically triggers in Gatsby. Gatsby exposes all of that so you can optimize that kind of process. It also has an access to the SSR, or server-side rendering part. Obviously, Gatsby effectively takes your React components and the data that you give it, and it server-side renders that in Node in order to generate the HTML and JS and CSS. And the SSR APIs give you the ability to customize or tweak the physical format and contents of that HTML that ultimately comes out the other side. And then finally, the final group is the Node API. This is the one that you're probably going to use more often than not. This is basically for everything else that happens at build time. So if you want to customize how pages are built, one example that you probably commonly do is if you want to programmatically generate pages and their subsequent paths as viewed by the end user, you can do that using the file system and any other variety of data sources. And it has a whole bunch of other stuff in there that's really useful and really powerful. And I imagine that this kind of thing is going to grow significantly over time. So it's great to have all that, but sometimes you kind of maybe want to have certain parts of that kind of more encapsulated and easily shareable across either one instance of your Gatsby setup, multiples, or even if you're pulling it from the community. And Gatsby allows you to package these lifecycle APIs into effectively plugins. And there's a whole bunch of naming conventions for the plugins listed here. So you've got the Gatsby source plugins. That's basically if you want to give Gatsby access to some other data format, and there's a format for pretty much everything that you can imagine, whether it be Markdown, CSV, JSON, some remote database, whatever. You just add it in there, and this plugin will consume that data and then make it available to you in the GraphQL layer. And that's just one sentence, but the power of that is just unbelievable because you've got one single interface to access data and then one way to access any number of sources. So it's so fast just to keep adding more and more data into the cycle, which then automatically plugs into the rest of this life cycle of generating these highly enriched SEO compliant assets. And then for other things, if you've got like YAML files or whatever sitting around that have some config, then there's transformers that take one format, convert it into something that's consumable by JavaScript. And then even more meta than that, you can have a plugin that extends a other plugin. One example is if you're doing Markdown processing, you'll use the Remark ecosystem, and you might want to customize how images work or add image support, at which point you'd have the Gatsby Remark image. So the image is the modifier to the Remark ecosystem. And then newly released this month, in fact, the stable release is Gatsby Themes. And this is the first time that you've been able to share and encapsulate the brains of your setup. So this is the Gatsby config file. So now you have not only access to the entire Gatsby ecosystem, but you've now got a method to encapsulate and share that across multiple setups. So this allows you to start leveraging all the power of what Gatsby gives, but in a micro front end type setup. So if you've got a complicated or highly dispersed technical team, then it allows you to have one central orchestrator and then delegate all that out to the teams, which is unbelievable. And then anything else that doesn't fit into any of those naming conventions just falls under the Gatsby plugin, of which there are numerous. I mentioned it before, but it's really worth highlighting that kind of the lead star, I think, in this, over and above this modular architecture, is the GraphQL layer. We, as a company, don't currently use GraphQL. We were slightly hesitant about it. Gatsby does offer a way to use its ecosystem and its output without having to rely on GraphQL. But I must say that now that we've tried it a little bit, I don't see why you wouldn't do this. Aside from all the standard things that it will bring to the table that GraphQL brings, it simplifies significantly being able to add and iterate on different remote or local data sources. And not only does it simplify being able just to access that data, it also simplifies the interface. So once you learn the basics of GraphQL, it just allows you to rapidly iterate and rapidly transfer that skill set so that you're just constantly just moving forward, which I've certainly never come across anything like that so easily and so cheaply before. It also modularizes and co-locates all the data fetching into one area. And it helps, again, this is not Gatsby, this is GraphQL, it helps make the data structure transparent. GraphQL itself typically creates a node tree that is heavily nested. This is a very light example on the left if you're not overly familiar with GraphQL. But the fact that Gatsby also adopts a kind of Apollo approach where you co-locate the GraphQL layer with the templates itself, it means that if you ever need to change any of this stuff, it's super simple and super safe because you don't have to propagate that change and that horrendously nested data structure throughout your app, which in JavaScript is obviously a very fragile thing. It also, for us, has proved a very low barrier pathway to introduce GraphQL as a company. Not knowing GraphQL and using Gatsby with GraphQL, it's surprising how much you can get Gatsby to do something without even getting too much into GraphQL. It's such a simple and verbose language that it's just so easy. And then also Gatsby ships with something called the graphical IDE, which in addition to your dev server, it will set up a graphical IDE, which is shown here on the left. And basically that's just a real-time hot reloading version of access to your data node. So however many Gatsby source plugins you've thrown in there, you'll get access to all that data, which means you can rapidly iterate on the actual query itself here before you even go back to your React setup, so that you can make sure that your data is coming through the way you want it before you even have to go through the pain of actually consuming it in your template. And this has proved immensely powerful. So just quickly before we finish up, I've got a couple of examples and a final note. Just going to really hit home just how powerful we found this and how quick it's helped us launch it and move forward with the replatforming efforts. So this is a super trivial, super simple one, but this is very representative of the types of things that you'll probably fall into with Gatsby. You need some kind of functionality. It's a very standard piece of functionality. Law of the internet, somebody's already created it for you. And it's also the same with Gatsby. If you want to add the sitemap, you add the relevant plugin, change one line in your config file, and that's it. Gatsby now automatically syncs your content from now until the end of time into your sitemap, just with one line change, which sounds really trivial to call out here, but it's just unbelievably powerful. And this is just one very simple example, but there's a whole host of things that you can add to your site with this same setup. And for us, probably 8 or 9 times out of 10, most of the plugins that we've added to our setup kind of looks like this. The API structure of plugins here is very similar to like Webpack's or Rollups API, where you can have a single string that configures it, it sets the defaults, or you can make it an object and add some options depending on what the plugin supports. But more often than not, we typically are happy with the defaults and it gives us what we've got, which is proven super good. And then again, just hitting home the power of this GraphQL layer. So here's an example of one of our pages. We've got the GraphQL statement at the top in line with the same template area where the actual page sits. So that means that it's super simple to iterate on fetching the data and then physically consuming it. And it just makes it super safe and super quick to change this over time. And obviously because GraphQL, it's easy to catch version changes or deprecations or whatever on the actual nodes that you're pulling out. And this is very much a paradigm that's popularized with Apollo and I think Relay. And then this basically is, this is an MDX plugin. So we use MDX. I don't know if, is everybody familiar with MDX? Some. So MDX is basically kind of what it sounds like. So it's Markdown, but with JSX support, which sounds kind of crazy, probably similar to having JSX in the first place or CSS and JS. But what this allows us to do is in our current platform, we've kind of custom rolled like custom macros or shortcodes for content or other types of teams to kind of add enhanced functionality that you don't get from the Markdown spec. With this setup, with MDX, it allows us to create React components that gives that same thing. So the developers just build a React component and then throw a little bit of documentation together, and then the content team, as far as they're concerned, instead of writing some square brackets, they write some angle brackets, and all of a sudden you've got a really high fidelity feature set in your content flow. And this is just an example of some of the pages. So the markdown typically has some metadata at the top, often referred to as front matter, and this is just some data that you can do absolutely anything with. It could be as simple as just static content that you're throwing onto the page, or in some cases it can influence the behavior of the page. In this particular case, we override the ultimate URL that customers are going to visit this page on, whilst keeping the logical hierarchy so that we can really impact the SEO whilst keeping the information architecture in place. And then with years of work in this simple tweak, this simple fix, this gives you like the sexiest legal page ever seen, redefining the world. But again, this is just obviously a really simple change. And the last thing I want to quickly show is Gatsby Image. Images are often the pain point when you're trying to go for really super optimal pages. I mean, if you look at Google's suggestions, obviously their suggestions are based on the Google homepage. Google homepage is pretty much an input field, which is pretty difficult to replicate or beat anywhere else. And images are usually one of the kind of common pitfalls for that. So typically you'll set up your roll-up parcel or whatever bundler to not only consume images, but also optimize them, strip unnecessary metadata, compress them. If you're super like free time, you'll maybe even set them up to generate multiple versions of your images so that you can set them. So you're only sending a very specific size to a specific device set, etc., etc., etc. Gatsby obviously knows about this, and it's created its solution. And the solution is something called Gatsby Image. And Gatsby Image is effectively a React component for creating dynamic images. It isn't necessarily a drop-in replacement for the native HTML image node, but it's a pretty good starting point. And then these other plugins are dependencies of that. So you've got the transformer Sharp. Sharp's an image processing library. It's a dependency of Gatsby's image. And then the plugin Sharp is the lower level dependency for the transformer. And then if you haven't already, which would be very surprising, you need the source file system so that you can actually access the images itself. But if you're using Markdown or MDX, you'll already have this configured. So with that, what does that allow you to do? Well, again, as I said before, GraphQL is the exact same interface. You write your GraphQL query, you go fetch a particular image, and then you use it in some kind of page using the Gatsby image this time instead of some kind of native one or some custom homespun one. But this also brings another kind of significant point. No, not only are we in the same area as we were before, where it's still the exact same interface language to get this data, i.e. GraphQL, but we're also leveraging some other benefits of GraphQL, and that's something that's called GraphQL fragments, which is basically a way to reuse and share snippets of GraphQL queries so that you don't have to keep typing out really long queries all the time. And this one, particularly the Gatsby Image Sharp Fluid, that's something that's provided by the Gatsby Image, amongst many others. But adding these simple lines allows you to create pre-optimized images with very nice effects, which you can see here. And effectively what this combination does, again, not very many lines, but this is going to consume whatever file you get from your design team. And this thing could be the native, 10,000 pixels or whatever you get from your design team. And it'll automatically compress it. It'll create the various versions for different device sizes and source set them. And then it'll also add some other customizations and optimizations so that it's absolutely the most performant that it can be for mobile and desktop experiences. And as you've seen here, by default, it also gives you these kind of nice effects where it'll hold the space in your document flow so that whilst the browser's downloading this image, your content's not flying all over the place, which is a really horrendous experience. And then you can do a whole bunch of effects. This is the default, which is the blur up effect, which is popularized for like Medium, but it also has a whole bunch of other stuff as well. But obviously, for people that are wide-eyed, they might notice that, well, that's great, that sounds really optimal, but there's still some more improvements we can do. There's a newer file format that supports better compression, and that's called WebP. WebP is basically a new format that's powered by Google and some of the technologies that they acquired, and it's got really good support in the browsers, depending on how unlucky you are to go as far back to IE10 or otherwise. But obviously you were like, well, I can save like another 30% in my data stream that I'm having to send over the wire. And remember, we care about mobiles. We want to try and make that as responsive and effective as possible. So what we'd like to do is like, how do we take this and convert it into WebP? We want the absolute best experience for our customers. But at the same time, we know that all of our customers don't use something that might be WebP compliant. So we need a fallback solution. And obviously, Gatsby's already solved this problem. So with a few extra characters in your GraphQL query, you use a different fragment, and you've got this out of the box. So now this setup is going to serve WebP as default, so it'll be more compressed, smaller image size, and Gatsby will automatically handle the fallback for you. So if a browser comes to your site and it tries to access the image and it doesn't support WebP, Gatsby will handle falling that back to another source set that does support this mobile responsive scaling. And these kind of things are just like collectively, the power of the system is just unbelievable. So in the last couple of minutes, I just want to call out another thing that's been absolutely critical to us getting to this really short BML loop, and that's Cloudflare Workers. So I mentioned before that our setup specifically uses Cloudflare as the CDN. And is everybody familiar with Cloudflare and its offering? Cloudflare Workers? Yeah, so effectively Cloudflare Workers are like Lambdas, but Lambdas that run in the CDN level. So if you're in Amazon or Azure, they're called Lambda at the edge. So instead of running on a server somewhere, they actually run the process in the CDN, so it's closer to the user, because obviously the CDN's scaled across the globe, so it reduces latency, etc. Cloudflare has a similar implementation, although they call it Cloudflare Workers. And why has that been absolutely critical for us? Well, first and foremost, without Cloudflare Workers, it'd be more expensive and it would have taken longer for us to physically ship the changes that we're trying to iterate through. And effectively what we do is, as people request various pages on our site, if they've been migrated to this new system, then we write some Cloudflare Worker script, which is in JavaScript. Cloudflare Workers are kind of like a service worker. It's like a node platform, although not quite. It's customized and tailored specifically by the Cloudflare team. So it's not quite the exact same, but it's effectively, for all intents and purposes, the same. But you write some basic JavaScript that analyzes the request, and you can write some logic to say, okay, I've got a request, so you set up your event handler, which is at the bottom here, and anytime the CDN receives a request on your domain, you run some event handler, and basically you say, is this URL for the new system, which we call Reactor? And if it isn't, that's fine, just let it go to the old system. And if it is, well, let's change the origin and serve the newer, faster, more optimal version that's powered by Gatsby, which again doesn't have any servers or anything. It's just a CDN straight to S3 bucket, effectively. And then we do one other thing that's also powered and would be really difficult to do actually in a migration is, as of Gatsby 2.4, they now support this concept of an asset prefix, which allows you to automatically prefix all assets inside the HTML that's output by Gatsby with some string of your choice. Which is, without that, it would have been really difficult to do this. In fact, it probably would have been really impossible to do this, if not super laborious. And all we do is we strip that off because we don't ship that to the S3 bucket. And then we send the request off to the new improved version. And what the customer gets is a transparent exposure, so that if you actually go away and navigate our site, SBUK, simplybusiness.co.uk, as you navigate through the site, you'll see the kind of performance and design will flip depending on which page you're on, and that's because we're at the CDN level triggering off where you're actually going. And eventually we'll turn this off. This is a simplified version. We do a whole bunch of other stuff, but the power of this is just unbelievable. And then in terms of managing this and deploying this, we use Terraform. Many Terraform users are aware, people. Terraform's absolutely amazing. And if you've got the latest version of Terraform, which is version 12, before, when you used to deploy content changes to Cloudflare, it would just give you some minified gibberish and go, are you happy to ship this? And you're like, sure, go for it. What's the worst that can happen? The whole site goes down. Or worse, maybe that's why Cloudflare went down last week, who knows? But now with version 12, it actually gives you a git diff of what it has on the server and what you're about to ship. So it's super simple and super safe to see what you're about to ship, which is great. So let's just try and tie this back before we finish for beer and pizza. So we've been through some of the cool stuff that React and Gatsby gives us, but how does it fit with a laundry list of things that we need? So it fits with React. Gatsby does. Gatsby is a React-based platform. It doesn't work with anything else. Plays well with the JS ecosystem. It obviously does. Battle tested. Yep, it's been out for a couple of years. We're on V2 of the major release. It's well supported and maintained. I think there's currently over 2,000 contributors to the Gatsby core, and Gatsby have also launched a commercial platform that sits around it called Gatsby Inc. So all great. Can consume Markdown, already does that out of the box, plus many others that we couldn't even have imagined. It's got a robust architecture that we can extend. We now have a whole bunch of plugins and the theme extension, which is going to be great for our digital experience and how we are organized as a company. Rich developer experience, yep, you've got local dev, hot reloading, GraphQL IDE. So the rate at which you can pump things through the door and ship it out to customers is is second to none. SEO compliant, yeah, you're just serving HTML and CSS, so there's nothing to worry about. Most bots are catching up with SPAs and routing, but very few of them are actually there yet, so this is a super massive win. And the output is fast, mobile optimized. Again, that's if you go to the Gatsby site, that's the first thing it tells you is just how fast and amazing it is. And then global scalability, it's just delivered by CDN, so we don't even have to think about that. And that's pretty much it. So with this, we've basically managed to get to a point where we can not only learn, measure, and actually build and release things to customers as fast as we can ever imagined, but we're also in a point now where with the extensibility and the cost of being able to extend Gatsby, we can ultimately land at a point where we can drive really enriched and user-driven experiences that are ultimately delivered by various data sources. That's it. Do your thing.